In preparing for today's podcast, I have to admit I was a bit stumped, not about the amazing organization about which I will shortly share, but more about my personal connection to the approach this organization takes to youth development. It's about courage, tenacity, never giving up, peer community encouragement, and fighting until the end. That's not what stumped me. There are many ways that those attributes can be achieved, but one that I had never considered was the sport in which more men than women participate historically. Although, with the 2016 gold medal won by Erica Wiebe, who now coaches young women, this is changing. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, a podcast featuring interviews with nonprofit and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. My hope is that you love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Feel free to pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and remember to send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. Beat the Streets and Boston Youth Wrestling merged in February 2021 to create Beat the Streets New England, a groundbreaking regional wrestling powerhouse that utilizes the sport of wrestling to provide opportunities for youth to discover their full potential by building relationships within themselves, their team, and their community. Beat the Streets New England, which includes Boston, Massachusetts, Providence, Rhode Island, and Hartford, Connecticut, focuses on their core values, the 5 E high fives: engage, enrich, evolve, educate, and empower. Their mantra states it all: to give kids a fighting chance by using wrestling as a tool and motivator to overcome socio-economic injustices. I cannot imagine a better way than that to teach tenacity, community, and the concept of never giving up. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, CEO Bior Guini, a wrestler in her own right, as well as an experienced leader in the nonprofit community. Welcome, Bior. Share with me your combined passion of wrestling, youth development, how you got involved, and your engagement.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here and to also hear our organization be talked about by another person so eloquently. So I really appreciate it and all the work you've gone looking into this. I am an immigrant, so I'm one of 11 kids. I just really wanted to fit in, and I couldn't find my niche or find how. And we moved around very often, so it was very rare that a year would go by without us moving to another city. So I found that it was very challenging for me, and I would often start acting out or lashing out in ways that I didn't understand why, or that it was because I wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere. I belonged to something outside of my family. Because as one of the oldest kids and the oldest girl, I had a lot of responsibilities. I was a caregiver, a lot of siblings. I was always responsible making sure that they were in a good place, ready to go to school, doing their homework. So just a lot of adult responsibilities for a young person. And I tried team sports. And although I love that sense of community, I didn't really have a lot of self-accountability there. I'll never forget, I was in high school, and I'm dating myself here. It's like the PA system went on, and they were talking about, whoever calls it the PA system these days, and they were talking about wrestling. I just remember thinking, I don't want to be home. I'm too short to play basketball. I'm 4'11". I don't want to do indoor track, So in my mind, I thought that it was going to be like WWE wrestling. So back then it was WWF. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can get some anger out. I can hit someone with a chair. It's going to be amazing. I walk up to the doors of the gym and I look in, and it's just all boys. And I just panicked, and I went and I hid in the bathroom, and I had to have my first self-talk, I think ever, my first pep talk. You don't want to go home. This is your only way. You have to suck it up. And I'll never forget going up to the coach and being like, hey, this is after the meeting, everyone went home. And I was like, I want to wrestle. And he's like, oh, great. We need a scorekeeper. This is amazing. And I was like, no, I want to wrestle. And he was like, yeah, team manager. And I was like, no, I would like to wrestle. And I just saw a look on his face, and it was just processing, right? Okay. And in my mind, it was probably okay, we've never had a girl. What do we do with the girl? What are the rules? And he was like, okay, well, practice starts tomorrow. So be there. It was the hardest thing from day one. Just like I remember I was in the locker room by myself a lot because it's all boys and just me. And I think I cried every single day for like 2 weeks just because it's a lot. You're pushing yourself to limits that you didn't know you were capable of. And you are solely responsible for this, but you have a team around you. So it creates this like you're in it together, but you're responsible for your success. And so I was like, I have no one to blame if I don't succeed but myself. First match was at home, like a home match in our school in front of everyone. My mom came, the one and only time she came, and I lost that match in under 30 seconds. I just everything I had learned in the last 2 weeks out the window, and I got pinned. And all I heard was my mom screaming, "Oh my God, you're killing her!" in the background. And you just black out and you wake up and it's done. The first thing that someone said to me was like, "Well, that's why girls shouldn't wrestle."
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't for my team. It's a random spectator. That's why girls shouldn't wrestle. And then I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. The kid that I lost to that day, I ended up having like a made for TV year, right? Where I just got better and better that year. And my last match of the year, I had won this tournament. Fast forward to young adult, and I actually run into that kid. He's like, I remember you. I wrestled you. And I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, first match of the year. And I was like, oh, that was so embarrassing. I lost in like under 30 seconds. And he goes, you ruined my perfect season. You beat me in the finals at the end of that year. So I
Uh-huh.
had grown so much at this like one loss that I had at the very beginning of the year. That was something that I think in a team sport or if I was in a different place, that would have mattered a lot to me. But what mattered the most was that I grew during that season and I was able to stay in it and have this team and this bond and this like self-awareness that I never had before. And come to find out years later that I had like, wow, I had a really great season. I actually avenged that first loss. So I was hooked ever since.
Wonderful, wonderful story in so many ways. And so the introduction, when I use the word tenacity, you're a model for that in so many ways. And I also want to highlight something else that you pointed out. Of course, the wins matter, but the personal accountability piece, and more importantly, the evolution. So one of the five high fives is evolve, and you just demonstrated that in the story.
It was one of those sports where when I was doing it, we didn't know what the future was like for women in the sport, right? I was wrestling on my boys' high school team. I didn't know I can go to college to wrestle. Nobody did. And people would say, like, why are you doing this? Like my mom would ask, why are you taking your time there? Like there's no future in it. And I love being able to look back and be like, oh, I'm the CEO of a youth development organization that uses wrestling. I think there was a pretty big future in it, but you have to make it sometimes, right? You have to make your own path. And that's what wrestling taught me. So I got to go to college to wrestle. I was on one of the very first women's team, Menlo College. And it's a story that sometimes you don't know the journey, but you have to start walking it, and eventually the path will come. And that's I try to live that every day. Like with Boston Youth Wrestling, when I first started as a volunteer, I didn't know there was going to be a part-time opportunity. When I started at part-time, I didn't know there was going to be a full-time opportunity. And then I switched careers completely. I didn't know what the trajectory would look like. I was like, I'll do this for a year or two. But if you keep building it and keep growing it and are passionate about what you do, then I fully believe that you can make anything happen.
I love that attitude for yourself because look what you've accomplished as a result. And I love that attitude as a model for every youth who enters the program of Beat the Streets New England. I have to go back for a second and just ask this because of my own, I guess, curiosity. Being in a sport that was primarily male and being on a team as the only female, and obviously you proved that you were able to compete at a high level over time because you succeeded. But what was that experience like?
Being stubborn was the best thing I could have been, right? So I was so stubborn. I was like, I don't care if I'm black and blue every day. Like I refuse to quit on this. And I didn't know these lessons while I was living them. And that's a big part of why our core values are what they are and what our curriculum is based on is teaching you these lessons in real time. Because I didn't know this when it was happening. I was a kid and I was just trying to not go home. I just knew that I also represented more than myself. I represented every other girl that probably ever wanted to wrestle after me. I kind of took it upon myself to be like, I am a representation of what girls in this sport could look like, or could be like. Maybe not always the best representation because, I was learning and growing too. But like with anything, when it's new and different, people may not always embrace change. Some people didn't want their sons wrestling a girl, turn it into something it was not. Like, what is her reasoning for wrestling? What is her true motivation? They don't ask boys that. They don't ask, why are you on the wrestling?
Never,
You know,
never.
like
Yeah,
never.
never.
Especially being a minority female who was curvy. I hit puberty at a very young age. The uniforms were not built for a female body. Things were just coming out that shouldn't be coming out, and men having to have uncomfortable conversations about sports bras or why my weight fluctuated when I was on my period. People don't like to be uncomfortable a lot, and people don't like change. But wrestlers do. We live in discomfort. We always are constantly changing.
Yeah.
And so the more I came back and the more I showed that I was committed, the more people reciprocated that, right? And so that's the beauty of the sport is if you give, it's like you're part of this family, this brotherhood and sisterhood that you're all going through it together, and that in itself earns you respect. And people change their minds, and people start looking at you differently, and people respect you because they know it's 100% you. There's no one else that's going to take that credit for you.
A couple quick things. You said so many great things. You opened up doors for females who never thought they could participate in a sport like this in the way that you did. And you did it early on. And then, of course, you became a role model. And then I think the other sort of key points is that you really faced a lot of resistance because people don't like change. And the idea of talking about something uncomfortable about changing bodies and adolescence and a female and the motivation behind it and all the stuff that you just shared, you really had to push through. I love that you're stubborn. And at the same time, right, you earned the respect that you also would only give your teammates if they earned it too. And I'm making the assumption that the next season became a little easier in terms of just your team. You may have faced on the outside still people saying what they needed to say because of their own discomfort. But it sounds like it might have been different, at least on the team at that point.
The term that you hear a lot, and we actually turned it into a program, right? I turned something that I heard a lot that was a negative, and I was like, I'm going to own this and turn it into a positive. So what you would hear a lot is, oh, you have to wrestle her, or like, oh man, you have to wrestle her, you have to wrestle a girl. And so Wrestle Her is actually one of our programs, and it's our girls advocacy empowerment program. Because I was like, no, the better I got. So you hear like, oh, you have to wrestle her, like, hey, you're going to have to wrestle her. And you can hear it. You hear the conversations change. You hear the way people talk about you or talk with you. And so I noticed that going from year 1 to year 2 pretty quickly. I have to acknowledge my coaches and my team because I work really well with positive affirmations, and I got like rookie of the year that year, and then, crowd favorite when I graduated. And so they became very supportive and every year in and out. And that's easily not the same story that a lot of women have. It is the men in the room, the men who are leading, that set the tone for how every other young man responds. And so they set an example that, like, if she's in here and she's doing the work, she's no different than any of you.
I think that's true in life. I think whoever has the majority, right, and has the power is going to set the tone. And when you set the tone of equity, everybody has a chance and an opportunity, and you can shine. It's really culture that you're talking about, that those coaches and the teammates followed suit, which was really setting the culture of respect and equity. And I have to give a huge shout out to taking a negative term, like, oh, you have to wrestle her, to, yeah, you're going to have to wrestle her. Like, it just changes, reshaping the tone of that expression into something that women can be proud of and men can take a look at and say, whoa, I better really rethink this. I love it. I commend you.
When I started working for Boston Wrestling, it was a man who founded it, and it was a man who trusted in me to lead this organization when most or majority of the organizations were being led by other men. Same thing when we transitioned into the merger. I think there's an idea of what a CEO looks like, right? I don't even have to describe it, because if you think CEO, you think CEO of a large organization or a national organization or a sports-based organization, especially in wrestling, you're not thinking of a short Dominican girl. Even my name in writing, most people think I'm a man until they meet me. I actually got on a board that way. I showed up to the meeting. They're like, oh, we thought you were a guy. And I was like, well, you're welcome, because it looks like you needed a woman here. It looks like you needed some color. So I'm doing dual roles, and I do very much embody that, where I'm not just doing work for women, but I'm also doing work for people of color as well, and women of color. So
It's clear the mission, both personally and professionally, is one of social justice. And I have to just highlight, and maybe this is just my impression, but you do it with joy.
thank you. And I think it's something that women do every day and we get no credit for, right? You take something negative and you just hold it in here, problem solve in your head, and you put a smile on your face, and then you come out and you fix things, right? But I've learned that I don't always have to put a smile on my face to fix things. I'm going to internalize it. I'm going to think through what needs to happen, and I'm just going to go out there and fix it. And sometimes that involves a smile on my face, and sometimes it's a game face, and that's what you're going to get. I'm not going to apologize for it either. The power of alliances and the power of collaboration cannot be ignored. And I think oftentimes we become very divisive. And when you divide, everyone loses. And I know that. And I knew that at a very young age, because again, if it wasn't for the men in that room letting me take up space, I would not be here today, because it could have been very difficult for me. And some people did try to make it very difficult. And they were like, no, she is part of this team, just like everyone else. And so it wasn't always easy, but I understood. I understood at like 14, 15, and 16 that was made possible because of that. And so there is a lot more acknowledgement of injustices today, and it's become a lot more visual. And I think that some people are reacting just like we were reacting, but we've had years to absorb this, And so, like, I understand those reactions, but sometimes the immediate action following those reactions create more divisiveness. Yeah. And so I like to look at, like, okay, how do we work together? How do we form alliances? And sometimes people just need to understand or be educated about what the issues really are, or see another perspective instead of being labeled or being accused or being pushed away. After that, if they still don't get it, then it's not the right, partnership, or it's not the right people to be involved. And there's plenty of people who want to do good. So focus your energy on that.
The whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion is really the inclusion piece of that you want to have people who represent the larger population in the room, because ultimately, when you work together, you get a much better outcome. So move us into the program. You mentioned Wrestle Her as an empowerment program for women.
Yeah.
Share with me some of the programs, how you get involved, anything that sort of strikes you.
Yeah, absolutely. We both founders in Boston and Providence, and we're actually starting to bring Hartford in. So I'm starting to learn more and more about the community in Hartford. So I apologize, Hartford, if I don't talk about you that much today, but know you're here. Boston Youth Wrestling was founded by a Boston public school teacher, Jose Valenzuela, also Dominican, also very similar experience, like understanding the injustices as he was growing up. And in Boston specifically, you think of like, the education here must be amazing. There's like Harvard, there's MIT, right? But no, we were one of the last states, for being a progressive state, to desegregate. Things that were done with good intentions failed miserably. And so it takes time to fix these things. And there's no easy way to do it. And so politics and systems get in the way of that change sometimes. And so Jose, being a Boston public school teacher, lived it, and then was trying to do good by starting a wrestling team for his high school. His principal was like, oh, you wrestled? We have funding for a wrestling program. Let's start it. And he went through so much red tape, so many issues, trying to create an opportunity for kids in schools in a city where there's 145 public schools, plus charter schools, plus private schools, plus parochial schools. Less than 1% of the budget is used towards athletics. The second challenge was, if all schools started and at the same time, the city would lock down. There are thousands of kids in the city. So you can start as early as 7:10 in the morning and finish as late as 5:30 p.m. So never mind trying to do a city league of anything, right? Forget it. So where do these kids go after school? Not to great situations. We had kids who went to, nearby bodega to like by some things, they actually witnessed a stabbing because they were just there after school. So he went to his old college teammates and was like, listen, like, I think we're better off just starting a whole nonprofit because we all know what wrestling did for us. And I want to provide this for these kids. And we just can't do it in the way we thought would be the easiest way possible. We started the nonprofit and we then were like, okay, we know the easy part. We all know how to wrestle, bringing kids in, training them, providing opportunities, and competing. But are they learning these lessons in real life? Or are we just giving them the sport and hoping that the sport teaches the lessons and they'll eventually figure it out? And I was like, listen, I didn't learn this till I was done with wrestling. We need to teach these lessons in real life. So we were early adopters of this partnership with Up to Us Sports, and they're incredible. They do coaches training. They do trauma-informed coaching. They believe in like high impact attributes, affirmations, all these. They were speaking my language. I was like, yes, I feel good just doing this program. Never mind like putting kids into it. We also partnered with, we'll use any partnership. If you want to partner, please call. Listen, MIT and the Heller School for like nonprofit management. And we did strategic plan after strategic plan. And we really started to dissect like, okay, we know three things. We know that kids who do sports are going to get these great attributes and they're going to be able to like, they're going to be more committed to school, they're going to be committed to communities, and they're more committed to living a healthier life. We know that there's a lot of barriers for sports, especially in a city like Boston. Mm-hmm. These opportunities might also be limited because of just getting around the city, safety, right? Especially for the girls. The sun sets and that's it. And the sun sets during the winter at like 3 p.m. So we knew we had to resolve this. And so we started thinking of how can we do this? And we're like, okay, well, maybe we work in school as a class. Can we make that happen? Yes, we can. We can be in an enrichment class. Okay, we can do after school as well and be right at the building so kids don't have to leave. Great, let's do that. Well, what about the kids that end up having to go back to their neighborhoods? Because we also know in Boston, you could live 45 minutes away, which is only like 3 miles from where you go to school, right? So if they have to go home because their sibling goes to a different school, maybe they're going to go to their community center. So let's partner with the community centers as well. So now we're in school, now we're after school, and now we're at a community center. So we're going to find you.
I love it. As an independent nonprofit, partnering with the locations where the kids are, which is great.
With a staff of one
yeah.
at the time.
Dividing yourself into a zillion people. Okay.
And then I also knew that there had to be some sense of consistency, right? If a kid walked into a room, they had to know this is what we're going to be doing. This is how we're going to be doing it. Because consistency is comfort, you know, and they know what to expect when they come in. So I had looked up curriculums and what kind of curriculums were out there for wrestling. And they were all fitness curriculum. We know we can do the fitness curriculum, but what sort of social emotional learning tools about like behaviors and self-worth and all these values, where did they exist? And so I deferred back to Up to Us Sports and I started doing research on a lot of different things and some stories that I'll share later as well. But like really got interested in restorative justice because I wasn't the best kid. Wrestling only took me so far. The other lessons I had to learn off from that. And so I'd gotten in trouble with the law a couple times, and sometimes it was fair and I deserved it, and other times it wasn't. And so bringing that back in, I realized that we do circles a lot in wrestling. Restorative justice is a great tool. And then I also realized that we needed a way for our kids to earn some income, making the program cost $0, but also providing opportunities for them to grow with us. We started building out a curriculum that touched upon a lot of different points. It was, you know, hey, here's our theme for the day. We're going to talk about self-worth. We're going to talk about, you know, some hard topics. We're going to talk about what does leadership look like to you? I'm not going to tell you what it looks like. I want to hear it from your point of view. We're going to talk about your health and wellness. How many hours of sleep did you get? Did you drink water today? Like, what have you eaten? You know, have you had fruits, vegetables, proteins? And this is all part of practice. And then at the end, we're going to get back together and we're going to talk about how our day went, how our practice went. And then we're going to give each other shout outs. We're going to say something good about ourselves and we're going to say something good about someone else in the room, right? And I cannot tell you how many kids didn't know how to say something nice about themselves. I had a hard time in realizing that there were kids that were in a school building that didn't have access to water all the time. So I'm like, your water's really low. What happened? They're like, oh, we ran out of bubblers today. So now I made sure that our coaches started bringing water to every practice. You went to a school and you were in school during the day and their lunch hadn't been delivered on time. So now you have to run a 90-minute fitness session and the kids hadn't eaten yet. So now I have to make sure that our coaches have snacks with them. We're a no miss meal program now. Food has to always be available. Just those 3 questions. How many hours of sleep did you get? Why is everyone only getting 3 or 4 hours? Oh, coach, we had been on lockdown for 3 days because of shooter threats. That's not a day to go into technique. That's a day for games and, talking. So by asking these questions, it just allowed us to be better leaders in our program and really build out like what our curriculum should look like.
It also sounded like you had the flexibility to shift on a dime because of what the kids were going through at any given time. The basic curriculum is familiar and kids are coming in kind of knowing what to expect. Any one of those things could pivot based on what the kids were experiencing at that time. And as you're sharing, in some way, it's so heartbreaking to hear that how hard it was for the kids to find one thing about themselves that was a positive. And then I'm guessing that over time of being in your program, that came more easily as time went on because they understood both the value, how to seek it, they knew where to get it, and you were giving it as a part of the program.
It's hard not to get emotional thinking about it, right? Because I see it firsthand, especially with our boys, because they're taught it's not okay to be emotional, that it's a weakness. And you're in a sport that is considered one of the toughest, bravest, hardest sports. And we're asking you to be vulnerable, right? Off the mat. It was amazing to see just how much they needed it. Week 1 or week 2, yeah, they're joking around and they're like making light of it because that's what's expected of them. And then by the time, if you get one, right, one leader, one person that they look up to be real and be honest, but they all followed. But what I think what we're doing is we're taking fear away. A lot of times what's preventing you from taking that shot or, doing that move is the fear of failure. So when you take away the fear of failure and empower, whether it's on or off the mat, you're going to take more risks.
So well said, because I also wonder if that experience of being vulnerable among your peers and seeing them be vulnerable actually builds that resilience and strength that translates on taking that risk on the mat. Everybody's going to fail at one point at another. And so to be able to have that in a supportive environment allows one to kind of take more risks in a controlled way.
Girls love to fight. It's in them. They're so powerful and strong and thoughtful. They pick up things quickly. And girls just brought a whole different mindset to the sport that I don't think people really knew how to handle, because they also love to laugh and joke around and have a good time. And you're in a room where everyone was so serious. And to hear that, they would think like, oh, they're not paying attention or they're not taking it seriously. But no, that's just a way of expression. Girls wrestling is the fastest growing sport in the nation amongst high school girls and is the fastest growing collegiate sport right now.
I love it because, again, I'm a generation older than you or two. And I feel like, we were always taught to not express the anger, right? Not express those high energy emotions. And so to really be able to express it in a different way, like you say, girls love to fight. But I think when you put fighting in a healthy, boundaried way that has strategy, it channels that energy that girls may, obviously naturally have, but has been repressed over the years, right?
And it teaches right from wrong, because being an immigrant, being Dominican, our discipline is very different, right? It's a very physical discipline. And so the cycle was starting to repeat itself with me, with my siblings, because I was the one in charge and I was a disciplinarian. Then the minute I had to go into a situation where combat was an agreement, I was like, wait a second, I can't be asserting physical, what I know now is violence, onto someone else. That's not an agreement. So it changed me completely. It's taking something that you are normally using because of anger or frustration or disappointment, turning it into something where you want to go into it in an equal situation. And you're going to come out on top because of the things that you learn, the skills that you learn. And so you see a lot of restraint and you see a lot of discipline that comes from that. And that's probably the number one feedback that we get from principal. A lot of our kids are referred to us by the deans because of behavioral. And so you can watch videos of these kids just showing great restraint, being confident and knowing like, no, I'm not going to engage in this. I know that if I can, that I'll come out on top. But
you're giving them the opportunity to make a choice. Previously, they may have felt they didn't have a choice. It's a fantastic gift that you're giving these kids. Any other programs? I'd love to hear the other programs.
So there's 4 core programs, right? I love themes and numbers and systems. So we talk about our 4 core programs, which is Wrestle Her, which we've discussed, Mat Time, and they're all kind of like wrestling punny. Mat Time, which is mentoring, advocacy, and training. And that is kind of like our overarching one when we talk about the curriculum that I told you about, the day-to-day that our coaches are going through, utilizing those skills from Up to Us Sports and youth development. And then we have CIT, which is coaches in training. It's workforce development. And so they come in, they work for us all year. They start in the summer and sometimes all year, but they coach, they do all the same certifications as our full-time coaches do. So they are just as trained as I am. They garden, so they grow their own food. Right now we're talking about health and wellness. They started a business during COVID. It's called The Hungry Wrestler. It's about having a healthy relationship with food. And so they have a recipe book with all the stuff they grew. They had a community day. And there's so many things that program does. I'm so proud of it. And we're actually interviewing for it this summer. And we went from one garden plot. We have 2 community plots now. And then we just actually we partnered with someone to do bucket gardens in front of our office. So
wonderful.
We had a lot of growth over the last couple of years and it's kind of figuring things out. First, we were like, all right, middle school kids. And they're like, well, maybe a little bit more charity, maybe just high school kids. Well, there's kind of like a nice little growth that happens between the 7th and 8th grade year that really turns our kids into potential leaders. So doing more research in youth development, it has to become an obsession, right? I'm like, all right, youth development, how can we do this? Psychology, talking to social workers. Something happens between the 7th and 8th grade year where you get them or you lose them. So we knew it was important to provide those opportunities to incoming 8th graders all the way through graduating seniors. If you graduate and you're 18 and over, you can actually coach middle school teams. So you get paid to coach. And that's still with partnership with Up to Us Sports. So now we're creating a coaching pipeline because I was having a hard time. Sometimes you got coaches who are really experienced, but it's their way. And I said, okay, well, that's not going to work for us because we're here for the kids and we want to build something for the kids. Yeah, Wrestle Her, Mat Time, CIT, and the one that just all of these bring me joy, but the one that I am so excited about is called Wrestle Back. And Wrestle Back, for anyone who knows wrestling, what happens is if you're at a tournament and you lose, you get dropped down to this consolation bracket and you have to wrestle your way back to 3rd. And oftentimes you're doing more matches than the person who wins that tournament. You have to overcome this loss. So you're just emotionally and physically gutted. And then you have to work so much harder to get onto that podium and overcome that if you ask any coach, most of the time, outstanding wrestler goes to someone who won the tournament. But for me, it's always that wrestle back kid that had to work their way through all of that. And so Wrestle Back for us is where the restorative justice really takes place. And we're working with kids who are coming out of the juvenile system, who are in long-term foster care or have higher levels of trauma. And we're helping wrestle back into community and wrestle back into life. It's taken us years to build because we want to make sure that when these kids come to us, that they feel that they can be, they're in a place that they can trust and we trust them, right? Because that goes 2 ways, and that they feel empowered and important, and that your past is just that. You're going to do good by you and you're going to move forward. I was one of those kids, right, where I made mistakes and I carried that with me until adult life. It's like, not even my record. What am I doing with myself, And it took a long time to overcome that. But it's because whenever you fail, or whenever, I put air quotes on that, whenever you make a mistake, it's often used against you over and over again.
And I think we're talking about mistakes that are made when kids are developmentally not in their frontal cortex is not fully developed. I mean, we've all been there. Some of us didn't get caught, and it's an unfair system. I actually just had, I teach at the Price School at USC, and I had one of my groups actually did one on the juvenile justice system. And they came up with a recommendation around kind of caring and support within a county to make decisions because kids can get tried as adults in situations where they really shouldn't be. And so I commend you for taking this on because, the pivotal word that you shared is trust. You have to rebuild kids' trust in themselves, trust in you as an adult, trust in their peers or in the system in which they're now in, and belief that they'll show up, people will show up for them. And it takes so much time, but it's so worth it because you really are reducing recidivism. And then they can put the past behind them and have a really wonderful, productive life.
I knew that the relationship had to be built within those that we would see as like oppressors in this, right? So we had a lot of kids that were joining the military. And then I was like, well, would you ever consider other like services? And they're like, yeah, but I have a really bad relationship with the police. And I was like, well, let's talk about this, right? Because it is very different in a city versus a suburban setting. And that's because you have time to get to know these kids and families. And that's not necessarily the case in a city where you're patrolling an area that you don't really have a lot of ties to. But there's also officers who grew up in that area and have these great relationships, but maybe don't know all the kids. And so we had an opportunity with Latino law enforcement group to come in and work with some pre-cadets. They were trying to get more women and people of color into the police force. And so I said, you know what, we have the CITs. They're learning to coach. Let's have them come in and teach safe restraints. But let's get these kids in front of the pre-cadets and build that relationship before they even go into the academy and they're a part of it. And so now we're actually building relationships with the police force where we're talking about George Floyd and we're talking about the trials. Our kids are actually logging on and talking to officers about it. They're talking to detectives. They're talking to leaders of color, right? They're talking about what it feels like to take off your uniform and just be a Black man in America and then put it on and have to live that. And so these are powerful conversations that mean a lot because it's so easy to get involved in your own group and have the one mindset, but understanding that change comes from within. And if you want to see change in that, you have to be part of that change, right?
Is any story you want to share that's an aha moment around without sharing names of any of your students, but anything that you want to share that all of a sudden it was like, wow, this student was struggling and now they're doing this, or I witnessed this, just because I think it brings it to life in a different way for my listeners.
Yeah, if I could share two, that'd be great.
Yeah, please
I have
do.
a student and I have a coach. I call him student zero or like patient zero or, BYW kids zero. And so again, our founder, Jose Valenzuela, incredible person. And him and I work well together because he's like, we were joking around the other day and he's like, I'll get stuff done because I'm petty. And I was like, I get stuff done because I'm bitter. We were joking about the early days of him, being in that school and having the one kid or the two kids, right? So kid zero, he actually was who I followed through the whole program. And the program started developing, really following his life. So, and this is very different because we do talk about a lot of like youth of color and the disparity in injustices when it comes to our youth of color and families, but poverty is huge. And so poverty affects all. So there's actually a young white kid really in the system, like your mom was disabled. He knew the government system better than I think I ever could, like all the paperwork, all the filing, all the things. And so he was actually a great resource for me when I didn't understand things because he was the one filing all the work. And this is a seventh grader at the point, right? And so he joined the team. He started doing better in school, but there's still that pull away from his family where he is also a caregiver for his niece because he was older and struggling, anger issues, like all the same things that we discussed for all of our kids. Went into high school, ended up actually getting on a team where the coaches were really competitive and meant well, but just mentally for him, he needed more. I brought him on to coach. There were two aha moments there. One of them was, and I had battled a lot with weight and weight management because we were doing it poorly during wrestling. So when I finished wrestling, I wrestled at a very light weight and I gained over 100 pounds pretty quickly. I made it a point to make sure that our kids had a no miss meal experience. And so I was at the school and some of the kids were trying to make weight. And the coaches were like, well, can you go buy this? Can you go buy that? And I said, oh, do you mind if I try something? I said, well, what do you have at home? What did your mom cook? Or who is cooking for you tonight? And can you ask that they just don't put salt in that? And can you ask for just like this many spoonfuls? And they were like, yeah. And the coach had made a comment about my weight at the time too. And the aha moment happened to him because he heard that. And then he actually stood up for me to his coach and was like, Coach, you taught us to not judge people when we step on the mat because of how they look. And you're doing the same thing. This one kid that we just from 7th grade on had followed and started adapting the program to really follow this kid's life with us. And so it grew different opportunities. The CIT program changed because of him specifically, because before that it was like, we're coaching, we're going to go run some camps. But then I was like, well, we need to implement more things into this that are going to be about leadership development, that's going to be about opportunities and healthy habits and things like that. So
it's really creating in some way in that example an interdependence between him and you all and how it grew together based on who he was, his willingness. And I'm guessing that his anger shifted as he became more connected and more of a leadership with accountability and what he could offer, because naturally he probably felt better about himself. And he had been in a family environment that in some way he was forced to be in a parental role. Like, I don't know many 7th graders who would know the governmental system and filing paperwork. It's a huge responsibility.
Well, there was definitely an incident where I honestly was like, he's probably going to punch me in the face right now, right? Because he was frustrated and was walking away. And I was like, well, okay, do I absorb this punch? Like, do I take him down? What do I do? And I was like, all right, just prepare yourself, right? And he didn't. He just like walked away. And the fact that I even had that moment where I was like, I know that this kid has that level of anger, and I know enough stories that he has acted on that. And then the next day he came down and like talked to me about how he was feeling and why he was feeling that way. He was the one that wanted to sit down and talk about it. And that was incredible. So that's when I knew like, okay, like we're doing it right. Not only is this kid learn to stand up for those even when they're not there, right? But also learn that self like emotional management. And then as an adult, he's still very much involved in our program and is a head coach of one of our programs and talks about it and uses his real life experience. So I'm excited that we were able to have someone from day one of the organization, see them all the way through. And now we're seeing more and more of that, which is really wonderful.
We can dedicate this podcast to him. We'll call him. And you just give him a heads up and say, this podcast is dedicated to him. He'll know.
He'll know.
You said you had a story about a coach, and then we'll
Yes, same thing. We got a call. It was a high school. The high school coach was looking to start a program. And so we came in and we're like, all right, how can we help? This is a little bit outside of our normal scope, but we're trying to grow wrestling everywhere. We went in and we started just running some practices, and kids were coming, and kids came for an entire season and only competed once that whole season. Can you imagine a room full of teenagers that are just in there hanging out? So to me, that proved two things. One, they were just happy to be in an active space. Two, that this all kind of happened simultaneously with the other story. We realized that we were building something really special. That's when we took that curriculum and we put it on paper. And, we talked about the health and wellness, we talked about how many glasses of water. And I showed it to him and he laughed in my face. And he was like, are you serious? You expect teenagers to write how they feel or talk about how they feel? And he's like, look, I trust you, so we're going to do it, but I'm skeptical. He said it much nicer than that, but now I know the real story, so I can tell you the real version. We're a couple of weeks in, And he's seeing these kids like really enjoy the conversations. And he loves being a part of these conversations, talk about it. And he goes, Coach, I have to apologize to you because when you told me this, I literally went home and told my wife, like, this girl is crazy. I was like, well, Coach, like, you created the space for the kids. You let them have these conversations. They did that. They turned it into what it is. Like, all I did was give you an outline for what this could look like. He is like the biggest advocate of our program. His kids are CITs in our program. Anytime I need to talk about what we're doing, I said, call this coach and he'll tell you. So he's like the biggest advocate for us. And I appreciate him so much for it. But he had to be willing.
Right. And I think that's again an example of demonstrating to him a type of servant leadership. So even though because he was speaking initially for the kids, they'll never do this, they'll never have this conversation. And so you were like, let's just give it a try. But it was about the kids. He created the space and you created the opportunity for him to use the space in a new way. Small and Gutsy is sponsored by the Intrinsic Group, my boutique management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and to ensure the organization's narrative is aligned with their culture. We'd love to invite you to be a sponsor. So if you're interested in sponsoring Small and Gutsy to keep it going, please reach out to me at reachus@theintrinsicgroup.com. So, are you ready for our quick Gutsy questions?
I think.
What is at the top of your wish list? But the answer cannot be money or funding.
Oh, I'm going to say opportunities. I would love, the top of my wish list is more opportunities for our kids, a connection with an organization or an internship or an opportunity to do good somewhere, right? We volunteer a ton and we've painted schools, we've cleaned youth centers. And so the more opportunities I can provide them with outside of wrestling to engage, I think the more fulfilling it is for our kids. Everyone always like, oh, I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know. Yes, the answer is always yes. Call me. Let's talk about it. There's always a way.
If you were to think of a song that describes Beat the Streets, New England, what would it be?
Happy, Pharrell, yeah.
I love it, Everett Williams. I love that song. Yeah, it's such a great song. You kind of can't sing that and be unhappy, right? What makes Beat the Streets New England gutsy? Because your organization's gutsy. What makes it gutsy?
That relentlessness, that willingness, right? That we're not going to take no for an answer.
Mm-hmm. The good side of being stubborn.
Taking stubborn and turning it into a positive, right? Like we're stubborn.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Love it. It's great. What is something that outsiders or maybe even a few insiders don't know about Beat the Streets New England?
The youth development work that we do, right? So they know about the wrestling, they're passionate about the wrestling, but the fact that we're doing trauma-informed coaching and mentoring and development, the fact that our kids are working for us. We were running a meal site all through COVID. The fact that our kids are doing entrepreneurship work, they're gardening, all these things like, we can share it, but I think it's sometimes tough for people to process because they just hear the word wrestling. They're like, oh, I know what they're about, but we're about how these skills translate to life. How does wrestling translate to life? And during COVID, is how does life translate to wrestling?
Yeah, we didn't talk about COVID much, but I love the fact that you flipped it and you also had to address a need in the community, which was around sustenance, like literally food, which is incredible. If you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about Beat the Streets New England, who might it be?
Oprah.
I love it. Yes, we're going to hashtag her. You never know.
Any of the Obamas I'll take as well. Ron Finley, who's called the Gangster Gardener. He's out of LA, actually. Look him up because he's amazing.
Bior, I just want to take a moment and thank you for this incredible conversation. I learned so much from you personally, just your story. The organization, Beat the Streets New England, is incredible. This was a gift to me and our listeners to learn about what you've done and what the organization represents and the students that you are impacting.
Thank you so much. Any opportunity to talk about the incredible work that everyone is doing throughout Beat the Streets, especially in New England, and all of our great partners and allies and all these other incredible youth organizations and supporters and stakeholders. Like, it is something that reminds me of why we are and why we're going to continue to be.
Oh, I love it. And would you mind sharing how people can reach you? So, for those who want to volunteer, those who want to sign up, those who want to donate, those who want to provide internships.
Yes. So you can reach us. You can go to www.btsne.org. Or I love being casual with our emails. It's BIOR at BTSNE.org. Or you can follow us, right? All the medias, all the social media. Beat the Streets New England, Boston Youth Wrestling, and Beat the Streets Providence. So far.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends. Give us some stars and write a review on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts, or buy us a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/small and gutsy. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, the amazing Pavel Franson, my exceptionally talented graphic designer, Nate Addy, my social work intern extraordinaire, Stephanie Tran. Please check out their bios on the Intrinsic website and all the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. Our blog of these small and gutsy nonprofits and social impact organizations can be found in the organizational stories section of the Intrinsic Group website, so that we can continue to link clients, volunteers, future employees, investors, and donors to this small but mighty network. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. We just want you to learn about the small and gutsy nonprofit and social impact organizational sector so they can spread their story and their impactful work. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.